Yoga is a very old and well-established practice. So it's not something that was developed 50 years ago, like biofeedback or something like that. It's been around. It's been around for thousands of years. We have descriptions from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras from like 200 BC. There are many other descriptions. It was likely practiced on the Indian subcontinent for thousands of years. And it was brought over to the US more recently in the last 100 years or so, and it really blew up a couple decades ago. And now it's like not such a novelty anymore. Now there are yoga studios everywhere. It's like almost not so cool anymore. When I was in college, it was still new and it was this like attractive, new, hip thing. Now it's just normal. So it's a well-developed philosophical system. And it's a system for taking care of the entire person, of the mind and of the body, right? So we think about yoga in terms of like a series of exercises, but actually yoga is much more than that, right? It's a whole system that guides how to live, ethical practices towards oneself, ethical practices towards others, how to take care of oneself, of one's body, how to take care of one's relationships, how to train one's mind, and how to move on a progressive path towards liberation, right? Towards enlightenment, towards higher states of consciousness. So that's like the big picture of yoga, right? Like sometimes what we get, in a 20-minute video online is just a physical practice. But even just a physical practice without all of the philosophy and the reading and the meditative aspect is amazing, right? So there's plenty of research showing that even just the physical, right? So stripped of any of the spiritual and the ethical, the whole deep philosophy, has huge benefits for both the body and the mind. Even there's a recent research study from 2024 that showed that a single session, so not even like you don't have to practice for 12 months and hours, a single session in the study was able to noticeably lower stress response. Right? So we live in a stressful world. We do what we can to lower stress, to avoid stress, but it's impossible, right? Stress is part of life, and we have built-in mechanisms for dealing with stress. And the better we are able to cope when stressful things come up, the faster we bounce back and recover from stress or after a stressful experience. Right? The easier our life, right? The easier it is to live, the better our physiology, the less impact on our health, right? So you could have a negative experience and be affected by it and kind of looping with it mentally, physically for days, or you could have a negative, stressful experience and be able to kind of like shake it off. Whew, okay. All right, that was that. And moving on, right? So it doesn't sit with your nervous system and with your hormones and with your thoughts and with your emotions for days and days, right? So yoga is one of these stress reduction techniques that can really improve our stress reactivity and how we deal with stress. And there are two thoughts of like what is actually happening. So one thought is physiological, right? So the practice of yoga trains the parasympathetic nervous system. It increases the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, I know it's a big word. Okay, so we all have the brain, right? The central nervous system. And then we have the autonomic nervous system, which is all the nerves going into the body, right? And the nerves that go into the heart, into all our organs, the muscles. And that splits into sympathetic, that's fight, flight, like, turning things on in danger, right? Like there's danger, there's something coming at you, right? Blood flows to the muscles, the intestines shut down, the pupils dilate, right? That's the stress response. That's sympathetic. And then parasympathetic is the opposite, right? So that's rest, digest, relax, right? Regenerate, restore, right? And the parasympathetic nervous system is devalued in our world, right? Like we are not giving that much weight and value to resting, right? And really eating slowly and having a nice break after meals to really like digest, and sleeping a lot and having rests throughout the day. It's just not how, at least not my world in New York City, that's not how the world is set up, right? What's valued is like efficiency, productivity, getting stuff done, right? Like being busy, making money, doing things, right? So we're all in this like skew towards a lot of sympathetic activity, and some neglect of the parasympathetic. So all of us may have a little bit of this like constant dance, right? In how we balance our nervous system between sympathetic dominance, parasympathetic dominance, right? And we want this like beautifully balanced, right? So it's like, okay, something happens and it's appropriate for sympathetic to turn on, it goes up, right? But then it comes back, rebalances, right? We don't want it to get stuck like this. Sympathetic, fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight, right? And this is like here, right? So any activity that helps you train parasympathetic will also bring down the sympathetic, right? So we're going for this equilibrium, for balance. And yoga is one of these strategies. It's not the only one, right? Tai Chi or other exercise or meditation, like 1,000 different paths. Yoga is one of them. And in research studies, you can clearly show, both from prolonged practice, but even from a single session, that it activates parasympathetic, right? So it will bring parasympathetic up and it will bring sympathetic down, right? So that means fight or flight, that's like cortisol, stress hormones, heart pounding, blood pressure high, sweating, all of that goes down, right? So if you just think like, okay, which parameters will go down in a study population that just did a yoga class and is getting tested, you just think like, okay, what are sympathetic nervous system functions? Those are the things that go down. And then what will go up? All the functions of the parasympathetic, right? So there's the redistribution of how the mind works, the brain waves, the blood flow, pupil dilation, the whole system gets a little reset. And what we also know is that practicing yoga teaches us to be less reactive to stress and to be better able to deal with stress, right? Because in part with repeated practice, the same thing, like the same whatever person beeping their car or whatever blocking your way, will become a little less annoying, right? A little less triggering, because if you're overall more balanced, right, and your nervous system, you're exercising your nervous system more, your nervous system is more resilient. So the same, thing that like, some beeping or something, your nervous system will not like do as much, right? So maybe instead of going like way up, it will go a little bit, right? And then it will come down more quickly. Isn't that cool, right? So that's like a benefit of practicing yoga, in just you're exercising your nervous system, right? You're exercising your autonomic nervous system, right? The parasympathetic and the sympathetic branch. And the other way that this is, thought of how this works is, as you're doing yoga, there are also psychological mind benefits, right? How you think, how you interpret reality, how reactive you are to, someone getting in your way or car, honking, will change because you will make a different interpretation right? A calmer interpretation. So maybe instead of the mind immediately jumping to like, oh, this, whatever, let's not, but you know what words, it may be like, oh, okay, that's annoying, right? Like a less intense of a reaction because you've been practicing equanimity, right? And you've been practicing tolerating some discomfort. And you've been exercising your nervous system, right? So these are these benefits of practicing yoga that go way beyond, being flexible or fit or toned or looking good or yoga butt. It goes way deeper than that into teaching you and teaching your nervous system to operate in a better way in the world. There's also so much more for those who are interested. Yoga presents really a whole system, a philosophical system, a guide for how to live, right? And there are all kinds of writings. Desika Char's book, The Heart of Yoga, is a nice introduction to this way of thinking about yoga, kind of yoga as like a psychotherapy, a yoga as a path towards freeing one's mind, liberation, right? And a spiritual path, right? So kind of you can choose based on what works for you to do the more purely physical yoga. And if that's what's right for you, great, it works, right? And if what feeds you and nourishes you is this like bigger, deeper, more spiritual take, it's available, right? And there are beautiful writings and descriptions, amazing teachers. Here in New York City is like one of the world meccas of like the best teachers and thinkers about yoga. But you can find amazing teachers in lots of places and also online, right? There are so many teachers on YouTube, so many teachers on apps. It's very easy to access, right? Plus you have your local yoga studio probably somewhere near you. So finding the style, the philosophical approach, the intensity, right? There is restorative yoga, right? Which is really, that's about really, learning to relax. That's a deep mind-body relaxation practice, right? You get into a pose and you stay. And it can be intense, right? So it also focuses your attention from like jumping around to thinking about, your to-do lists and whatever, money worries and relationship stuff. If you're really feeling a stretch, like it will bring you into the moment. And then you can add breathing, maybe counting your breaths, or just, slow, deep breathing, or maybe even humming, right? Or the ujjayi breath. And it's a lot of different things to do, right? So it's also a practice of focusing the mind, right? It is a type of a mindfulness practice. It's a really great way for people with mental health conditions to practice mindfulness. Might be, from my point, working with a lot of people with anxiety, pretty severe depression, OCD, ADHD, executive dysfunction, bipolar. It's a safer entry point. It's good to have something to do, have eyes open for chunks of the time, and just move slowly through postures and not jump into like very long, eyes closed, no input sits, because that could actually be very difficult or destabilizing for someone who has a significant mental health condition, right? So always like connect with your mental health provider, talk through it, get some guidance. But it's a beautiful tool and it's versatile, right? Like you can choose Iyengar yoga. You can choose vinyasa yoga, right? And move through the whole thing and breathe. You can choose hot yoga. You can choose whatever fits you, right? And maybe try 8 different styles to really figure out what do you like, right? Which teachers fit you, right? And we're still just talking about the physical yoga, the asanas, right? But that's just one aspect of yoga, right? The Raja Yoga path, the 8-limb path of yoga, right, gives 8 different practices, right? Things to do. And asana is just one of those. So there's a lot more, right? But somehow asana, the practices, the physical poses, is what fits with the Western mind. Great, let's go with that, right? And then the other things get added, the training of concentration, sense withdrawal, right? Like this coming into the moment. Pranayamas are breathing practices. That's often incorporated into yoga practices. Meditation is often part of it. Sometimes chanting, which is like a beautiful way to combine breathing and mindfulness. Rarely in Western world do we include the first two, right? The practices around inner purity and our interactions with the world, right? But those are the first steps. First, like clean up your life, your like inner life, like how you live with yourself and how you live in the world with others. Because if your life is a big mess, it will get in the way of making progress on this path of Raja Yoga, which is a spiritual path. So that's just, it might be too much and overwhelming. So if what works for you is to just get into like doing 10 minutes of yoga now and then, great, right? Yoga has been my practice for 24 years, maybe 25 years now, something like that, since college. So yeah, not putting the numbers, no exact numbers. And for me now, it's a morning practice, right? So I wake up, I have my morning practice, and then I do a bit of yoga. And when life is really good, I have 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes even an hour. And when life is really busy or my kids like have to go to school early or something, camp drop off, right? It might be 5 minutes, right? Sometimes I'm so tired, I just do a child's pose, right? But it's good for me, right? It's like, it's such a ritual of how I start my day. And I think it does regulate my stress response and my ability to be more present and more regulated, right? More equanimous throughout the day. So 5 minutes is fine if that's what you have. And there's so much research. We're not going to go through all of it, but I'm including some references if you like to see what is the research. It's there and it looks good, right? So give it a try.